Hello, my name is Matt Heine,
I'm Sophie Hewey.
and this is our group presentation about the case between Bill Graham Archives and Dorling Kindersley. So jumping in, who was Bill Graham? Bill Graham was born January 1931 and lived until October 1991. He was a German-American concert promoter and musical artist manager. He transformed the presentation of concerts and psychedelic rock into popular venues and popular music. He also generated brand and name recognition by promoting under the name of Bill Graham Presents, becoming a household term and responsible for bringing rise to venues such as the Fillmore East and Fillmore West in San Francisco and New York City, respectively, and such acts as the Grateful Dead, Jefferson Airplane, and Big Brother and the Holding Company. Bill Graham was also recognized as bringing in a new standard of professionalism into the music industry with organized and well-promoted concerts, where previously the concerts were promoted by word of mouth and street talk. Following his death, he was predecessed by a collection of concert memorabilia such as posters, live music recordings, and photography from his long successful career in the music industry. Dorling Kindersley, on the other hand, is a British multinational publishing company created in 1974 by Christopher Dorling and Peter Kindersley in London. They specialize in publications that provide distinctive visual representations along with descriptive text, and they publish works for young adult novels, multimedia education, and light reading such as coffee table books. So a brief summary of the case. In 2003, Dorling Kindersley, as I will continue to reference them as DK, published a 480-page coffee table book about the Grateful Dead and their history. Included within the book was graphic art and concert posters used at the time for promotion and crowdsourcing, owned by the Bill Graham Archives. So DK, through a third party known as the Grateful Dead Productions, reached out to BGA to seek permission to use the images and the poster work in their coffee table book. Here's an example of what some of the images look like. The Bill Graham Archives would only agree to the use of their images if the Dead Productions agreed to trade permission and rights for BGA to use video footage of the Grateful Dead concerts in order to make and sell CDs and DVDs. They did originally come to an agreement, but they could not agree on a licensing fee, and so it seemed that everything was at a standstill. Although DK decided to go on and publish the book without a licensing agreement and use 7 images from the BGA collection. This infuriated BGA and forced them to sue for infringement, claiming under Section 106 of the Copyright Act that they were granted copyright holders are granted the right to hold, distribute, and derive copyrighted works. This then grants BGA ownership over the 7 images used in the coffee table book. DK, on the other hand, claimed that there was no unauthorized use of the images and that their use of images fell under the fair use.
So the court decided in favor of Dorling Kindersley, who I will also refer to as DK, and they decided this on the basis of 4 factors, the first being the purpose and character of the use, which was found to be transformative, and I'll elaborate on all of these later. The second factor was the nature of the copyrighted work, which was considered artistic, cultural, and historical. And then the third was the amount and substantiality of the portion used in relation to the copyrighted work as a whole, and this will also be discussed in depth later. And the fourth factor was the effect of the use upon the potential market for or value of the copyrighted work. And in this case, the Bill Graham Archives, which I'll refer to as BGA, could not prove that this work would cause market harm. So moving into fair use, we'll take a look at the fair use checklist. So as I mentioned earlier, the first factor, which found the purpose and character of the use to be in favor of fair use here, was based off the transformative or productive use of the images. So these images, the posters made by Bill Graham, were a dual-purposed artistic expression and concert promotion. So these were widely distributed to generate public interest in the Grateful Dead and to convey information to a large number of people about upcoming concerts. And they were marketed by the copyright holder, the Bill Graham Archives, as creative artworks, which usually are at the core of intended copyright protection, but because the posters have been published so extensively, the court limited the weight that it placed on this factor and instead favored DK's work because the images that they used were considered to be used for cultural value as historical artifacts that were documenting and representing the occurrence of these concert events. And in the book, which is called an Illustrated Trip, it used a timeline, and on that timeline, these images appeared in chronological order, which contributed to them being considered historical artifacts. So the nature of the use, this is moving into the second factor, of fair use. They found DK in favor as this was a published work. It was non-fiction based and it did serve an educational objective. So as I said earlier, the historical value of the posters is considered here to be an educational way of looking at this timeline and having an idea of when each concert occurred. Going on, moving on to this third point, which found DK in favor as the small quantity of posters was used and the portion used is not central or significant to the entire work. So in this case, the poster images account for less than 1/5 of 1% of the book. They only were found on 7 pages out of 480, and the original posters from the Bill Graham Archives range in size from a 13 by 19 inch to more than 19 by 27. And when DK reproduced these images in the coffee table book, they were a 3 by 4.5 inch, which is less than 1/20th the size of the original. So that was very significant to the case. And lastly, the court ruled that DK's use was not for sole profit from exploitation. So even though they were making money off of selling this book, there was not a significant effect on the market or the potential market of the copyrighted work, and there was no similar product marketed by the copyright holder. So because DK placed these images in chronological order on a timeline to provide a visual and cultural history, the original posters and the market for the original posters was not affected. So as far as why this case is important to freedom of speech or freedom of expression, this case is found important because it's very essential to be able to share knowledge, to have access to historical artifacts without needing to see the original posters, and to have this sort of visual representation of history and culture through the transformative act of creating a chronology or a timeline and using these images in a collage type of fashion. And this fair use doctrine, when used it was considered to be used in a healthy way because The fans of the Grateful Dead were able to learn about shows and tours and see photos and posters from the promotion of these shows. So it was valuable for information and for cultural and historical reasons. And then because fans would not be able to necessarily see the original posters, they can see them in this sort of reproduced transformative way. So lastly, to conclude, this case is often considered a victory for fair use because the argument for fair use was strengthened, and it's also recognized as a historic one because this case favored art and history against the corporate interest of the Bill Graham archives. And it's also recognized as a success because you can still purchase the coffee book table. So that concludes our presentation. Thank you so much for watching.